I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. Today we have the second of two reports explaining how to prepare fish by drying or smoking them. We talked last week about the first steps of cleaning and salting freshly caught fish. The directions can be found on our website, voaspecialenglish.com. To dry fish, you will need either a drying table or a place to hang them. If a table is used, it should have a top made of wire screen or thin pieces of wood with space between each piece. Lay the cleaned and salted fish still wet on the table. Do not let them touch each other. Be sure that air can flow around the fish from all sides, including the top and bottom. Build a small smoky fire under the drying table for the first day to keep the flies away. After that, you can keep the flies away by covering the fish with a thin cloth. Do not let the cloth touch the fish. Fish taste better if they are out of bright sunlight while they are being dried. For best results, put the drying table under a tree. Turn the fish over every other day. Small fish will dry in about 3 days if the air is dry. Large fish will take a week or 10 days to dry. After the fish have dried, place them in a basket. Cover them with clean paper or large leaves. Then put the basket in a cool, dry place off the ground. Make sure as much of the salt water as possible is removed before you smoke the fish. The smoking can be done in a large round metal container. Remove the top of the drum and cut a small opening on one side at the bottom. Cover the top with a strong wire screen. This is where you put the fish. Build a small fire in the drum by reaching in through the opening at the bottom. Wood from fruit trees makes good fuel for your fire. The wood will give the smoked fish good color and taste. Hardwoods, such as hickory, oak, and ash, also burn well. It is important to keep the fire small so it does not burn the fish. You want a lot of smoke, but very little flame. One way to get a lot of smoke is to use green wood, not dried wood. You should smoke the fish for 5 days or longer if you plan to store them for a long time. After you finish smoking the fish, remove them and let them cool. Then wrap them in clean paper. Put the fish in baskets and keep them in a cool, dry place off the ground. Dried fish must be kept completely dry until they are eaten. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. There are different ways to store fish. 2 ways to keep fish for future use are canning and freezing. 2 other methods are drying and smoking. Today we have the first of 2 reports describing step-by-step how to prepare dried or smoked fish. Begin with fish that are just out of the water. If the fish are small, leave their heads on. Cut off the heads if the fish are longer than 20 centimeters or weigh more than 115 grams. Now clean the freshly caught fish. Cut off the scales and cut open the stomach. Remove everything inside. Then wash the fish in clean water and rub salt into them. Next, put the fish in a container with a solution of 300 grams of salt and 1 liter of water. This will remove the blood from the meat. Keep the fish in the salt water for about 30 minutes. After that, wash them again in clean water. Next, put the fish in a solution that has more salt in the water. The water should be salty enough so that the fish float to the top. If the fish sink to the bottom of the container, add more salt to the water. Cover the container with a clean piece of wood. Place a heavy stone on the wood to hold it down. Leave the fish there for about 6 hours. After that, remove them from the salt water and place them on a clean surface. Cover the fish with a clean piece of white cloth and let them dry. We are not done yet. We will discuss the next steps in drying fish next week. We will also describe the smoking process. Another method of preparing fish is called dry salting. Wooden boxes or baskets are used for dry salting. After cleaning the fish, put a few of them on the bottom of the box or basket. Cover them with salt, then put more fish on top. Cover them also with salt. Continue putting fish and salt in the container until it is full. Do not use too much salt when using the dry salting method. You should use 1 part salt to 3 parts fish. For example, if you have 3 kilograms of fish, you should use 1 kilogram of salt. Remove the fish after a week or 10 days. Wash them in a mixture of water and a small amount of salt and let them dry. We have talked a lot about salt. Keep in mind that doctors advise people to limit the sodium in their diet. It can raise blood pressure, and some people have more of a reaction than others. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts and MP3 archives of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. In late January, for the first time, President Obama publicly confirmed the American use of drone strikes in tribal areas in Pakistan. He answered a question on the subject during a Google video conference with people around the United States. He said, "I want to make sure that people understand that actually drones have not caused a huge number of civilian casualties. For the most part, they have been very precise, precision strikes against Al-Qaeda and their affiliates." Debate continues about how many people, including civilians, have been killed in those drone attacks. Drones are technically known as unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. These aircraft, however, are not just used for airstrikes, and they are not just used by governments. Drones are useful for aerial photography, including industrial tasks like pipeline inspections. And human rights activists, environmental groups, and journalists are increasingly using drones in their work. Drones can fly above news events to capture images that reporters may not be able to get close to on the ground. Matt Wade is a journalism professor at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Students in his drone journalism lab are exploring different uses for drones in news reporting. He says, Drone journalism, as an idea, is less than a year old at this point. The first instance I saw was a labor protest in Poland where a man had a remote-controlled helicopter and he put a camera on it and he flew it up and got just a view of the protests from the air. And you could see police moving into position to kind of block the protest route. A video on YouTube shows images captured by the so-called robocopter. A group of citizen journalists in Moscow used a similar drone camera to record protests during Russian parliamentary elections. And Professor Waite noted a recent environmental case in the United States captured by someone flying his remote-controlled airplane. He spotted a meat-packing plant that was polluting a nearby creek that ran into a nearby river. He had images of a river of blood flowing out of this meatpacking plant, which was against the law. And environmental regulatory authorities were alerted to it. Drone use in the United States is now rare because of federal restrictions on airspace. However, a new law calls for easing those restrictions by 2015. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Technology Report. Egypt's government faced international criticism when it blocked internet service to try to suppress the uprising there. But Egyptian activists found other ways to get their message out. Google, Twitter, and a company called Say Now launched a service called Speak to Tweet. They wanted to give Egyptians a way to communicate with the outside world. There are phone numbers for people to call to record a message. An audio file is then posted to Twitter. Anyone can listen to these voice-to-tweet messages at twitter.com/speak-to-tweet. The phone numbers are listed on that page, and people can also call them to hear the tweets. Ujwal Singh and Abdel Karim Mardini launched Say Now as an American-based company in 2005. Thousands of celebrities use the service to connect with their fans. Google purchased Say Now at the end of January, just days before teaming with Twitter to create the new Speak to Tweet service. Most of the calls have come from inside Egypt, and most are in Arabic. Volunteers are translating the messages into English, Spanish, and French at the website Alive in Egypt. People are also showing their support for the protesters through pages on Facebook. Facebook says it has 5 million users in Egypt, including 1 million on mobile devices. Social networks like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube also played a part in the protests that forced Tunisia's president from office in January. Gillian York is with the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University in Massachusetts. She says the use of social media has been different in the movements in Egypt and Tunisia. She says in Tunisia, it was used mostly to spread information about what was happening on the ground. In Egypt, people have been using social media to organize. Gillian York is also a member of the Open Net Initiative, a group that studies internet censorship and spying.
She says the Egyptian shutdown had a much wider effect than past internet bans in Nepal, Burma, and China's Xinjiang province. She says Egypt's internet community is about 20 times the size of those three places combined. Internet service returned in Egypt after a 5-day shutdown. Experts at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development estimated that the action cost Egypt's economy at least $90 million. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Last week, we told you about the Imagine Cup finals in the United States. Team Flash Food from Arizona State University won top honors at the Microsoft event. The team developed a mobile application and website to help restaurants, hotels, and farmers markets donate food to people who need it. The businesses enter information about the food they would like to donate. A notification goes to a team of volunteer drivers who can go pick up the leftover food and take it to people in need. This is perishable food, the kind of food that cannot normally be handled by food banks or other food recovery organizations. The Flash Food Project grew out of the engineering projects in Community Service Program at Arizona State. The director of that program, Richard Philly, says the project has far-reaching possibilities. Mr. Philly plans to work with the team to find ways to extend the Flash Food app to other countries. In his words, would those cultures in those different countries be open to the idea of taking leftover food and using Flash Food to connect with people who are hungry? We don't know the answer to that yet, says Mr. Philly. The Imagine Cup is now in its 10th year. Mark Hinsbo is a vice president with Microsoft. He says students who enter the competition can now build their ideas around a lot of technology that was not widely available 10 years ago. In the beginning, he says, people were building almost everything from scratch. But now, he points to the Flash Food app as a good example of bringing together existing technologies. The students built the app on the assumption that there are smartphones in the hands of most of the people they need to work with. Also, the use of mapping software lets the app give the volunteer drivers turn-by-turn directions to the restaurants with food to donate. Team Flash Food will represent the United States at the Imagine Cup World Finals in Australia in July. Mark Hinsbo says solving world problems like hunger is a major goal of the competition. But another major goal is to get more American students interested in jobs in science and engineering. When you look at the pipeline in science, technology, engineering, and math, we come up way short, he says. As a result, he says around 1 million software and tech jobs could go unfilled in the United States over the next 5 years. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, we welcome you to news about technology. Have you ever had an RSS news feed sent to your mobile phone or computer?
If so, you have Aaron Swartz to thank. He helped develop that internet publishing technology when he was 14 years old. He also helped develop what came to be known as the social news website Reddit. But sadly, the 26-year-old internet activist was found dead in his apartment in Brooklyn, New York on January 11th. His death was called a suicide. Aaron Swartz believed that information is knowledge. He believed the internet should be used to make that knowledge available to everyone. This belief is what eventually got him in trouble with the law. Aaron Swartz was to face a federal trial in April. He was accused of using computers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to download millions of academic documents from JSTOR. He could have faced 35 years in prison and as much as $1 million in fines. Some people have called the charges extreme. Renee Hutchins is a law professor at the University of Maryland. She said it is unclear if government lawyers had a solid criminal case against Aaron Swartz. She said he was basically accused of violating a user agreement with JSTOR, which charges fees to use its huge collection of research publications. Renee Hutchins says Aaron Swartz had legal accounts with JSTOR and with MIT through Harvard University. A court of appeals ruled that his actions violated user agreements and could be considered criminal. But a recent ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court disputed the idea that federal criminal law is meant for that purpose. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Today we take another look at facial recognition systems. These can tag friends in Facebook photos or help police identify suspects in the recent riots in Britain. Kurt Romer is Chief Security Strategist for Citrix Systems in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He says technology makes it easier than ever for governments to identify and target people. And it is very much a fine line between effective law enforcement and privacy. Christine Unsworth researches information policy at Drexel College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She says she is concerned that governments and police are increasingly using facial recognition software without clearly defined policies. There is so much secrecy around this information that we don't really know how these kind of images or other sorts of personal data points are being used, how long the information is being retained. Questions like these are part of a larger debate about privacy and free speech. After the riots, British Prime Minister David Cameron raised the possibility of interfering with social networks. He said the question was whether it would be right to stop people from communicating when we know they are plotting violence, disorder, and criminality. China's official news agency, Xinhua, says the British government recognized that a balance needs to be struck between freedom and the monitoring of social media tools. Xinhua added, "We may wonder why Western leaders, on the one hand, tend to indiscriminately accuse other nations of monitoring, but on the other, take for granted their steps to monitor and control the internet. Europe has some of the world's strongest policies on privacy rights. But Kurt Romer says, like other Western governments, they have not clearly defined their policies on new technologies. China calling that out really shows that we have some issues to address here from a policy perspective, in addition to technology. One debate involves an action in San Francisco on August 11th by the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. BART disabled wireless service in some of its underground stations for 3 hours. It says protesters were planning to use mobile devices to organize activities to disrupt train service. BART has faced protests over what activists say is police abuse by transit officers. BART says it acted to protect public safety. The American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California says the decision was in effect an effort by a government agency to silence its critics. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Researchers are studying how mobile phones can help to document the spread of malaria. The study is part of an effort to stop or at least control the disease, which killed an estimated 655,000 people in 2010. Scientists say malaria-carrying mosquitoes cannot travel far on their own, but they can catch rides on people. That is what Harvard University researchers discovered in Kenya. They found that people carry the disease east from Lake Victoria to the capital, Nairobi. How did they discover this? The answer is simple. They followed their phones. Harvard public health researchers studied the mobile phone records of 15 million Kenyans who travel. Researchers estimated the distance and length of each phone user's trip away from home. This information was based on messages to and from the mobile phone carrier's 12,000 transmission towers. The researchers then compared that information to a map showing reports of malaria in different parts of the country. The researchers then estimated each user's probability of being infected in a given area. They also estimated the likelihood that a visitor to that area would become infected. The result was a picture showing malaria transmission paths starting in Lake Victoria. Carolyn Buckey is an assistant professor of epidemiology at Harvard. She says one of the first steps in stopping malaria is to learn how human travel might add to its spread. Carolyn Buckey also says researchers are considering using mobile phone records in other areas to help identify malaria transmission paths. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
The fish over every other day. Small fish will dry in about 3 days if the air is dry. Large fish will take a week or 10 days to dry. After the fish have dried, place them in a basket. Cover them with clean paper or large leaves. Then put the basket in a cool, dry place off the ground. Make sure as much of the salt water as possible is removed before you smoke the fish. The smoking can be done in a large round metal container. Remove the top of the drum and cut a small opening on one side at the bottom. Cover the top with a strong wire screen. This is where you put the fish. Build a small fire in the drum by reaching in through the opening at the bottom. Wood from fruit trees makes good fuel for your fire. The wood will give the smoked fish good color and taste. Hardwoods, such as hickory, oak, and ash, also burn well. It is important to keep the fire small so it does not burn the fish. You want a lot of smoke, but very little flame. One way to get a lot of smoke is to use green wood, not dried wood. You should smoke the fish for 5 days or longer if you plan to store them for a long time. After you finish smoking the fish, remove them and let them cool. Then wrap them in clean paper. Put the fish in baskets and keep them in a cool, dry place off the ground. Dried fish must be kept completely dry until they are eaten. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. There are different ways to lay the cleaned and salted fish still wet on the table. Do not let them touch each other. Be sure that air can flow around the fish from all sides, including the top and bottom. Build a small smoky fire under the drying table for the first day to keep the flies away. After that, you can keep the flies away by covering the fish with a thin cloth. Do not let the cloth touch the fish. Fish taste better if they are out of bright sunlight while they are being dried. For best results, put the drying table under a tree. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. Today we have the second of 2 reports explaining how to prepare fish by drying or smoking them. We talked last week about the first steps of cleaning and salting freshly caught fish. The directions can be found on our website, voaspecialenglish.com. To dry fish, you will need either a drying table or a place to hang them. If a table is used, it should have a top made of wire screen or thin pieces of wood with space between each piece.